So probably I'm going to assume that most of you have no idea what a pivot table is. Okay, so a pivot table is a very useful tool in Excel, and it's something that we use to summarize our data, to kind of put things together, and in doing so we can show relationships between variables. We can do sums, counts, averages, things like that. So as your data gets more and more complex, it's very useful to be able to focus on certain things, organize it, make some meaning out of your data. So we saw the other day where we had to kind of like rearrange things in order to get a chart, okay? Because very often you just have like a lot of data, and it's just kind of, where do I start? What does it all mean, okay? And you may need to focus on certain things. You may want to just focus on sales, or you may want to just focus on number of customers, things like that. And a pivot table is very good at helping you do that. Now, one thing I do want to point out right here is that in order for a pivot table to work in the data, there needs to be some sort of repetition. Okay, so for example, I need many times that I have the data of Joseph, or many times the data of, you know, sales in the north region, or many times the sales in the south region. That way I can kind of group them together. I can put them together and summarize that way. Okay, so that's very important to remember, that there is some sort of repetition. Okay. So yeah, as things get more and more complex, this becomes more and more useful, because to manually group things together can take a very long time. So this can save you a lot of time in that sense. Let's take a look at some example data. So for example, here is data regarding, I believe it's sales of various types of shirts in different regions, by different people. No, not by different people, different genders of t-shirts, and the style. So for example, you can see here in the East region, okay, so the boy t-shirts, right, boy t-shirts, boy golf shirts, boy fancy shirts, and then girl tee, girl golf, fancy, okay, and the shipment dates, how many units were shipped, the prices, cost, etc. Okay, and then we go into the West region, you know, the different types of t-shirts and gender, shipment dates, etc. And you can imagine that this data is not just for January, but let's say this data also goes for February, March, April, May, you know, etc., and not just for East and West, but also North and South. So having all of that data, if I needed to get something like, what is all this, how is all this data useful, okay? And you might start to wonder, like, what kind of message can I get from this? And like last time we said, you know, you can start with a question, and you can say, for example, how many units were sold in the East? Right? And then you can start to tally up, like, okay, in the East here we have 12 units, 12 units, 12, 10, 10, 10, and I could add those up manually, right? Which makes my head hurt, because I don't like to do math, right? Just like all you guys. Yeah, and imagine that not only do I have to add that up for January, but I have to add it up for February, March, and you can kind of see how things get really extensive and really complex, and having to deal with all those numbers can be a bit of a pain, okay? And using a pivot table, we can actually do that very easily and get a result like this. So as you can see, in a pivot table, it organizes things very easily for you. So here are your different regions. Here is in January, here are the number of units sold in each of the regions. February, the number of units sold, etc., etc. And then later on, we can also add on a grand total. You can see the grand totals down here, but you can also have grand totals on the other side too, so that you can see the totals in the East, totals in the North, right? These would be the totals of each month. So totals of January, February, etc. And what's really nice about this is that once you have your data summarized in this form, once you're concentrated on something, then you can use this to kind of generate your charts and whatnot. So for example, I could plot like what were the sales over time for the East region. So you can see here in January it is at 66, then it kind of goes up to 80 and then up again to 102, up, and then maybe somewhere it goes down, etc. So you can kind of plot these charts, or you can plot a chart that compares, right? Maybe I plot a chart that just shows like January and the comparison of each region in January. So you can see by summarizing, you can do many things with data, and you can actually get meaningful messages. Okay, so let's take a look at how to actually make one. Okay, so all you need to do, it's pretty much 3 simple steps. Take the data, create the pivot table, and then customize. Okay, so I'm going to work with this example that we already used one time. Again, if you need this example, it is available on Moodle. You can download it, follow along. At any point in the video, do pause the video if you need a second to kind of follow along, or if you want, you can just watch the whole video and then try it afterwards. Okay, so what we do is, first thing, we need to select the data. So starting from the top, remember to also grab the headings. Okay, those are important because that's how we're gonna kind of classify the different fields in our pivot table. So grab that and then scroll all the way down. Okay, and as you can see, it is quite extensive. It goes all the way down to there. Okay, so once we have that, we go to Insert, Pivot Table. Okay, so feel free to pause the video if you want to take a look at the different things here. Just kind of talk about it quickly. Here's your data range, so we've already selected it. So all that data that we chose goes in there. And then you have the option, where do you want your pivot table? Do you want it on a new sheet, or do you want it on an existing sheet? Okay, so I'm just going to make my Excel window a little bit smaller so you can see here. So I have my different sheets here. Let's put it on a new sheet. Okay, if you put existing sheet, then you basically just click somewhere on your existing sheet to say where you want to put the pivot table. You want to put it like here, for example. Let's see. Okay, but for this example, I'll go to new worksheet. Okay, and you'll get something that looks something like this. If it looks a little bit different, don't worry. It means the same thing. Sometimes, depending on your version of Excel, you might get a slightly different visual there. What's important is here, you'll see this, and this will always look the same for everybody. Okay, so what we want to do is, what do we want to find? What do we want to concentrate on? Okay, so looking at this data, we might start to think, well, let's start with that question that that we did from last time. What were the sales of Joseph, of each person? Okay, so let's take a look at their sales of each person. So you can see Joseph here, and if I were to do that manually, I'd have to do this, plus this, plus this, and that's just for January. And if I wanted it for all of the time, then I'd have to do it for February, March, etc., etc. Okay, so let's just go to our pivot table, sheet 1 here, and let's take our salesman. Okay? And you can, it's just easily drag and drop. You can either put it in rows, and you can see that it appears here in rows, or you can put it here in columns, and you can see that it appears here in the columns. Okay. The thing with putting it in columns, if you have a lot of data, what happens is it goes all the way across and you get the horizontal scroll. So that's one thing to keep in mind in choosing where to put it. But apart from that, it doesn't matter too much, okay, apart from aesthetics and readability. So I'm going to put it there, and I want to deal with the net sales. Okay, so I'll grab that. And where did I put it? I put it in the values. Values is the part is what you're actually trying to measure. Okay, and I'm trying to measure the sales of each person. Okay, so I'll take that, put it in here in the values. Okay, so remember that in the values field here, this is stuff that you're trying to measure. Okay? And as you can see here, it measures very nicely for me that I have Joseph, Lawrence, Maria, and their sales. If I wanted to split that by month, so I want to know how much each person sold in each month, I could take the month and drag it in one of these, either here or here again, and maybe I'll show you the difference. So if I show it there, you can see that it puts it by year because there are 3 years there. And this happens in the newer versions of Microsoft Excel. If you have an older version, it won't actually group them into the years, but it'll actually put every single month, and it'll get really, really long this way. So it'll go like January 2007, February 2007, March, April, 2008, January, February, March, blah, 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 and it'll be really long. The new versions of Excel kind of group them together and kind of let you expand them as you like. So here they've been grouped 2007. If I want, I can expand that and it'll further go into quarters, and I can further expand that and it goes into your individual months. Okay, so sometimes a bit of a nice feature. Okay, and if you don't want these features, for example, if I don't want them divided into quarters, you can see that they appear here. I can take the quarters and just pull them out there. And now I have the year and divide it into months. So I can know that in January 2007, these were the sales figures for our people. Okay, and if I collapse that, then I just get a summary of 2007 itself. So the totals of Joseph in 2007, Lawrence, Maria, etc. Okay, same for each of these. You can expand those and you can see each of them like so. Okay, let me just show you a different view. So if I were to take this and drop them into there, okay, you can see the different months actually end up in the rows now instead of in columns. Okay, so various ways of looking at it. Let's see what happens if I pull the years out. I don't want to see the years. And then here's January, and I assume that this is the totals of January of 2007, 2008, and 2009 all in one thing. Okay, years is going to get kind of messy. So here's the year. So Joseph, again, you can collapse and expand them as you like. So there's 2007 for Joseph, 2007 for Lawrence, and you can see the sales figures there. Okay, so starting with a question, what are you focusing on, and then dragging your different variables accordingly. Okay. Years. Month. Okay, something like that. Okay, so I believe we just did this question here, right? How much did each person sell in each month? Let me give you another question to kind of work on. So in a second, I'll tell you to pause it and see if you can solve it, and then I'll give you the answer. Here's the question. What were the sales of each product? So I want to know how much revenue was generated by RapidZoo, how much revenue was generated by Superglue, etc. Okay, so that's the question. How much revenue was generated by each product? Okay, so see if you can solve that. Okay, go ahead, pause now. And welcome back. So here you can see the solution, pretty easy. Net sales doesn't change, right? That's what we're actually measuring. We're measuring the sales, and all I did was take the products and drop it into here, and so we have a summary of the products and how much revenue was generated by each product. Now you can go in and add as much detail as you want. So for example, I could divide it by salesperson, so the sales figures for each person for each product. You do that, and then you can drag in the regions, and you can see divided by region, products there. If I don't like that, I can put it here. And basically you can make it as complex and as simple as necessary. Sometimes you want something really complex, sometimes you want something very simple. If I'm just dealing with a table of data, you can probably go on the more complex end. If you're looking to take some data and make it into a chart, I would probably go on to the simpler end, just because charts, you want a very simple message, whereas tables, it's you can take more time to kind of look at the different values. So if I say, okay, how much fast car was sold in the north by Maria, you can go here, fast car north Maria, there's the sales for the north and Maria. Okay. Next, what I want to show you is the filter field. Okay, so we haven't actually looked into here yet. So let's say I have all this data here, and maybe I'll just simplify it again just to not get so much confusing stuff. And so, okay, let's keep it at this. So each person, the products they sell, and how much revenue was generated. And let's say I want to deal with like the months again, and I want to know how much in each year or in each month or something like that. Maybe I'll just go with years. Okay, year. And if I were to actually take years and put it in somewhere here, for example, let's put it here. You can see it divided by year, or I can move it up here, and you can see years here, and different products. And as you can see, again, my chart is starting to get a little bit complex and perhaps a bit confusing with all this data. And what I really want is to be able to focus on each year. Okay, so I have no choice but to deal with the years and everything like that. But I don't have to have it here. What I can do is I can put it in the filters field. And what that does is it puts it up here and gives me a drop-down box. And now I can actually deal with each year individually. So I can actually select. So I just want to see the sales figures for 2007. And you can see that those are sales figures for 2007. So 5,000, 56,000, right, for Joseph, the fast car. Let's see 2008. 2008. And you can see the sales figures for 2008. So this is dealing with things one at a time, okay, which is sometimes what you might want to do just to make things a little bit more digestible, okay. If you do want to later use this, how should I say this? Sometimes you want to see them and you don't want them to change. So every time I change, you can see that I lose like the data of the one before, right? So now I don't see the data of 2008. And if you want data to be used later on, and this is going to be useful, so pay attention, this is going to be useful for later on when we might need to generate various charts. Okay, so if I want this data to kind of be used for later, what's good is to copy and paste it somewhere else. So I'm just going to open another sheet here, and I'm going to paste it here. And maybe I'll put a little note here, 2007, just so I know what this is talking about. And then I'll go back here, get the 2008 data. Okay. When you're selecting data, you might not want to select from the top left, because what will happen is it'll try to kind of move your pivot table like that. So when I select data in a pivot table, I usually go from the bottom corner here, and it makes it kind of easier to select things. Okay, so copy and paste. And another good thing about doing this is that you'll notice that when I've copied and pasted it here, it's no longer a pivot table. So this stuff just kind of remains static. It's unchanging, whereas your data here is inside a pivot table and may be changing. So if later on I'm still working with this pivot table and I kind of change it, it's changed there, but you still have this data here, right, that can be worked with, and you haven't lost anything. Whereas here you might be like, oh crap, I just lost that stuff that I was working on. I don't remember what I was doing, right? So always a good idea, if you're gonna have stuff that you're gonna be working on later on, copy and paste it somewhere else. Okay, that way you have it there, and modify it as you like if you want to get rid of the grand totals, that sort of thing. Okay. I think that about does it. Let me just check. Okay, so yeah, basically what we did, sometimes we want to organize putting each separate year on a separate sheet or in a separate section just to have it to work on it later on.